What is clear though, we have a government who has a task. Not an enviable task by any stretch. They're finding their way, but they've got a desire. Key message: invest, invest, invest. Rebuild Britain. So the question we're here to ask is, well, how do we do that? And what are the implications now post-budget? Where do we go from here? Stamp duty, capital gains tax, business rates, implications on interest rates, that's all up for discussion. Lots of discussion around planning reforms. Don't think we'll get there this afternoon because we've had plenty of discussion of that already. So the question I've got is has the government gone far enough to rebuild Britain, or too far? To help answer these questions, we have three distinguished guests, experts on the panel. We have George Long, who's Managing Director of Charters. You don't look old enough for 22 years in this business. Life treaty 35. Oh gosh. All in the residential sector. We have Ed Hampson, who's Associate Director for Research at Savills, expert in data analysis, and also author of the monthly housing market updates and forecasting, which are very much appreciated. Thank you for those, they're very helpful. And we have Ben Walker, who is Head of External Affairs at Persimmon Homes, background in housing policy, think tanks, 10 years experience in the Westminster corridors, housing associations now in the private sector. So between these three, we have hopefully all the answers. So, questions. We might have time to take questions from the floor as well. We'll see how we go. So we've got 25 minutes to burst through this. So I was going to ask you each in turn for not an overview of everything on the budget, but some of the key striking, perhaps one striking thing you saw from the budget that you wanted to focus on. So I'm going to start with yourself.
Well, I think for me, obviously I'm involved in the development and residential sectors across Hampshire and Surrey. So I think from our perspective, obviously the increased stamp duty for investors was a key point that came in immediately as well overnight with the budget. And I think certainly when it comes to places like Winchester, Guildford, the richer places, I could probably say around here, stamp duty and those type of things, not so much an issue. But I think really from our point of view, investment in our local towns and cities is so key really. And I think you saw, for those who saw my presentation this morning, if you're looking to buy an investment property at £500,000 in Southampton or Winchester, you've got to pay £40,000 stamp duty. And I think from that point of view, it just makes it unobtainable for a lot of people, really. And I think I'm from a sort of standpoint where we need less tax in the housing market, not more. And I think when you look at stamp duty, for instance, and you look at the total government take, it's such a small element of the actual government policy. I'd much prefer to see something like 1% stamp duty across the board for everybody, which would make it a much fairer.
You see that as a way of accelerating.
Yeah, a bit like Ireland. Ireland's got the same tax process as that, and less punitive, really. I think there's a if you've got a lot of money and you want to buy a lot of houses, then I think that you're deemed to be poorly taxable, really. But it's tricky, I think.
Ed, how about yourself? Most striking thing from the budget?
So I think, well, first of all, the tax on additional homes was quite a stir ourselves as well. That's a viewing party, and when they mentioned that, just the drawing in the breadth across the whole room was entertaining. But I'm just assuming I would say mine is actually probably a slightly more macro, maybe more nerdy answer, which is just not a specific policy, but the overall effect, the cumulative effect, and what we expect the effect on inflation and therefore interest rates in the long term is going to be. So we don't think that the short-term effect of all these cumulative policies on interest rates is going to be too dramatic, but that long-term terminal rate of what we think interest rates is going to go down to over the next 5 or 6 years has changed a fair bit actually, and we've already seen that reflecting in mortgage rates. We've seen a lot of lenders already repricing based on that. So that's been a fairly immediate effect we've already seen from the budget.
And the response of the OBR as well in terms of
exactly.
different things.
Credit on this government for already chatting to the OBR about their budget. That was very much appreciated. But yeah, so that's an immediate effect on the mainstream housing market. Has already been a bit shocking to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think to sort of add to the nerdy points, I think the really interesting bit for me was not what was in the red budget book, but it's in the OBR blue book, the economic and business outlook that comes out. And that confirmed that actually their forecast is for the government to deliver 1.3 million homes, so some 200,000 short
Those
there.
200,000.
Well, this is the thing, and it's also worth noting as well within that that's a UK-wide forecast of 1.3 million, and the government's targeting 1.5 million for England. So I think it goes to show you the scale actually of the ambition is there, but I think what sits underneath that and what's going to drive that level of growth, that level of housing starts, I think is still missing from the government. So I think that's going to be a real challenge for them. And interestingly enough, the OBR have obviously confirmed that. There was also something that came out today from a leaked email from Homes England, where they've also sort of poured water on this ambition. So I think the bit for the budget was that there was a lot of ambition there, but I think you can will the end, but you've got to will the means as well, and I think that was the bit that was really missing in this budget. And
for a new government coming into that, then, are you seeing these things as just already in play, or are you anticipating that? Put the crystal ball. The crystal ball's coming back this direction, by the way. So I'm asking you to turn the crystal ball on now. And are you foreseeing there's going to be wholesale change? You already know about some of the planning reforms, some of the headlines elsewhere for fiscal change.
I think it's fair to say within the OBR's comments they haven't factored in what the NPPF will do. I think it remains to be seen what effect that will have. I think one of the key things that we're considering as a business is that, frankly, you can deregulate the planning system as much as you want, but if the market isn't there, if the buyers aren't there, these homes aren't going to be built. So I think that's one of the key challenges that government really needs to reflect on. And I think the fact that effectively the interest rates are going to be higher as a result of this budget, growth is going to be pretty bad over the next 5 years. That doesn't create an environment where I think you're suddenly going to generate a whole lot of new people sort of wanting to buy new homes, to staircase, to have more first-time buyers in the market. I think that's one of the real problems. So I think the NPPF will come down the track, but I think government will fairly soon realise that actually the NPPF probably isn't going to be quite the game changer that they need it to be.
Well, I'm coming back to you, and I'll come back to you in a moment. But on that, if planning, do you agree? Is planning not the issue, and actually it's about confidence in the market and unlocking that?
Well, I think, like I said earlier on, we weren't surprised when we saw the fact that there are less people buying houses, and actually the price point that they're buying them is a lot less as well. We said, like all of us a year and a half ago, that's going to be the result of higher interest rates. But at the moment, and the cost of living, etc., mortgage rates, but at the moment, at the first time since the 1960s, we haven't got a government scheme in place to help first-time buyers. And I think there's a really important statistic there, which is that in 2022, 52% of the market was made up of first-time buyers. And if you look at that now, that's dropped off significantly by 200,000 first-time buyers. So at the bottom of every chain, from my point of view, there's a first-time buyer. Not all chains, but a lot of chains there are. And then there's that £750,000 question as well. If you're living in a house that you've lived in for 10 years, you bought it at 500, it's now worth 750, 800. What's your next move? Do you go, right, well, let's buy it 1 million, 1.1 million? Stamp duty sort of puts paid to that. Mortgage rates means your mortgage is enormous and the cost of that is enormous. Or do you think, right, we'll just stay where we are, might be a bit small, but actually our mortgage is pretty reasonable? Or do you think, right, well, we'll sell and we'll move down market? And I think a large majority of people are staying, and I think quite a few people are downsizing back to 500, and obviously that fits in with the majority of people buying in between 400,000 and 500,000. But it's not an easy one to talk about, really, about where you go. But I think the key thing is to get first-time buyers back on the market. And we're seeing them now going back to town centres, back to one-bedroom apartments, two-bedroom apartments, where it comes into their affordability bracket.
Yourself, just the ball, sort of, if I may.
Just to sort of basically to add on and to agree with those points. So yes, we saw sort of flats over the whole COVID period really underperform the rest of the market. People just then nicely leave their houses in the suburbs. But the past few months, maybe half a year or so, we have started to see flats outperform houses again in some parts of the country at least. And again, it's just an affordability issue. So we're definitely seeing that coming through the data, and that's probably just going to get more and more severe. As on the first-time buyer point, they need to buy or afford a deposit for that. It's hard to do if you're also paying rent, and rents have just been going up. It's just going to go a bit crazy over the past few years, and various measures in the budget are not going to be helping rental growth. So the additional tax on additional properties, that's just going to reduce rental supply, just going to put rates even further and further. That would be even harder for them.
I noticed in that last year the average size of a deposit for a first-time buyer in the southeast of England was 56,000. So do you think that? Sorry, I'm particularly not taking it back.
No.
But I mean, do you think that? Do you think that Bank of Mum and Dad are stepping in and helping out?
They are, and that is helping. I can't remember the exact figure, but yes, the majority of first-time buyers are getting support from somewhere, and that is just going to increase. So at the moment, the vast majority of housing wealth in this country is held by the boomer generation, the old people with homes, and that is slowly starting to trickle down to the younger generations. And we are predicting to see the biggest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history as that wealth comes down. So that does mean the Bank of Mum and Dad is just going to grow. So lots of positives and negatives to that, but it does mean that there is going to be this transfer of wealth. And at some point, it's going to be incredibly uneven, and it's trying to make sure that that transfer of wealth is in a hopefully moderately equitable way. I think it's going to be a huge challenge for both the government and just wider society for the next few decades.
Then from the point of view of the Persimmon, the first-time buyers, do you find that they're driving your business?
I think, we would say competitively priced relative to some of our competitors, so we do have a high proportion of first-time buyers who are our customers, and we've certainly seen them disappear. It's actually been really interesting where you've still got Help to Buy in Wales. Really interesting to contrast. We can see sites which are similar in terms of profile, makeup, and things like that, and the profile of buyers is materially different. Across the border. So, I do think it's an absolute travesty that there isn't anything there for first-time buyers. I think one of the other points just to reflect on with interest rates as well is that I think sometimes there's a perception that sort of interest rates are 4.5%, 5%. That's almost a sort of back to a normal and things like that. I think that needs to be challenged actually, because I think 5% interest rate on the loan to values that we have these days is a very, very different ballgame, and I think. This does need to be reflected. So while it might be sort of back to a more normal in terms of lots of other investment, I do think people trying to buy their home and what it's going to cost them on a mortgage does need to be factored in. And we were doing some analysis around the mini budget actually, but sort of finding that actually rates where they are now on a home that's sort of £400,000 actually very similar to the sort of 15% interest rates that people were experiencing in the 1980s and things like that. So I definitely think there needs to be something to help bridge that deposit gap, and that is the Achilles heel. That is the real problem. It's the deposit. It's not the servicing of the actual mortgage. It is the deposit that's the real thing that's biting first-time buyers.
I thought it was interesting actually, because first-time buyers as well, that there's a sort of semi-resurgence, but that's off the back of 30-plus year mortgages. And because obviously the gap between the house riding and the gap in wage growth has never been bigger. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
I guess what do you think the government should have done in the budget instead? Is there something which you're looking on going, actually there was an opportunity here, you missed it?
Yeah, so we were hoping for some level of demand side stimulus. Just everything it is demand side, which we do need to do, particularly the simplifying the planning system. Big thumbs up for that, assumes all works. But yes, they're probably the country that nobody is able to afford them. They did make the mortgage guarantee scheme permanent, which is something, there's such a small drop in notional that scheme. We weren't quite exactly expecting a Help to Buy 2, so much as I know some of the audience would like that, but just something would have been good. Maybe a slight slackening of stamp duty for first-time buyers instead of, in fact, making more onerous or returning to its previous norms. We're actually predicting a bit of bringing around like this crystal ball, a big bulge in first-time buyers in Q1 next year for new hire tax duties.
Before it gets enacted, effectively.
So people try and bring forward less transactions.
All that's doing is pulling in from future years, so you automatically get
the net difference is the same.
I think from my perspective, where you talk about this generational wealth, and we're never going to see a lot of that coming down. And actually, just quickly talking about inheritance tax, only 3% of households in the UK pay inheritance tax, don't they? So it's less acute as you might think. But what I would have liked to have seen, I think, is an equity release product. So if you're a parent or a grandfather and your grandchild or child wants to buy a property, why can't the government guarantee the release of funds from their equity to give to someone as long as they're buying a property? Surely, for me, that would have been a sensible way of raising money.
As opposed to doing it through funders.
Yeah, well, as opposed to getting cash out of the government. It's a free way, I suppose, from the government, effectively guaranteeing that scheme by releasing equity from. But obviously, you're not releasing equity, that the government are giving the buyer the money, but they're taking a stake in someone's house. And like with the Help to Buy scheme, which was almost becoming self-funding in a funny sort of way with how busy it was getting, it's that same mantra, really, that if you're selling the same percentage of that house 10 years on, it's going to be considerably more.
But yeah, good investment for government as well,
Yeah.
albeit in the future.
I think you can see as well where we've had such a strong house price growth as well, particularly, certainly in Winchester, for instance, house prices have doubled every 10 years effectively. So I think you've definitely got the equity-rich side of the market that can help that, definitely.
So I was going to just focus minds on sort of the investor confidence now and the purchaser confidence. Do you see that as something in a temporary blip? Do you see it coming back? Is it something which is just, I guess, is there any hope at the end of the tunnel? Please say yes.
Well, we manage a lot of properties in Southampton, over 1,000 now, and I think when we buy a company, most of the portfolio that we buy, as in terms of a managed portfolio, is non-compliant. And I think compliance is a big issue when it comes to investors, and certainly investing in residential property. It's an absolute minefield if you haven't got someone who's keeping up with the latest rules and regs. But also as well, it's such a punitive tax environment really for people. So I think you combine that with the compliance and the tax, and I think people think, right, well, what's the point? And there's a lot of stuff that you can actually put your money into where it isn't property, which you can get a better return on.
So what's the advice to clients then, or purchasers, in light of the budget? What's your advice?
Don't go out.
Buy before April next year. I think if you're a first-time buyer,
Let's say one thing about investor confidence, which is, so whenever I've spoken to an investor or we've done a survey or anything over the past few years, and they say, what are your biggest challenges? Sort of almost always, one of the top few things will be just uncertainty, both political and economic. And given the political situation we've had for the past few years, not surprising. We now at least have a government, have a big majority. They seem to have something of a plan, if you like it or not, just up in the air. But there does seem to be a relatively straightforward, predictable path of progress for the next 5 years or so, which has resulted in some confidence coming back to the market, even if there are sort of less welcome tax implications alongside that.
yeah, and I think we would enter that on our side of it. I think the ambition is there. I agree. There's stability. There's a clear plan. There's a clear commitment. I think it's, as I said at the start, I think that starting point is there. I think the onus is now government, and to give them their due. They've not been in for that long either. I think more of this will come, but I think they need to put the struts underneath that plan and start to build that out. And I think one of the other things as well is that I think to get anywhere near the sort of the 1.5 million target is that it's not about just sort of picking one thing. There's not a panacea. It's kind of throwing. You've got to do a lot on this. You've got to do a lot for housing associations. You've got to do a lot with private house builders. You need to be looking at right across the market. Get build to rent going. I think if you're going to want to get anywhere near that, it really is that you need a whole solution for all of these different parts of the market, and that together will give you the sort of big bang that you need.
And often the government will say, well, actually, it's for the development industry, for the private rented sector, for RPs, that you have to be creative, you have to be innovative. Is that fair? Is that something which the industry can now respond to?
From the housing association sector, I think under the last government, I think they were being asked to do a lot with the grant they had, to the point that actually even in this budget, we were saying, we would build out homes, and there wasn't an RP market actually to take on the affordable units on certain developments. So it wasn't necessarily stopping us building. We were eventually finding people, but it was certainly a problem. And I think government actually found it quite strange actually that a load of private house builders were advocating for more money into the affordable housing sector. But interestingly, the affordable housing sector has also been arguing for effectively greater support for first-time buyers as well, because they know they can't cater to everyone and things like that. So fundamentally there are some problems in terms of just getting this whole system working together.
Do you think that the industry can respond and create confidence?
I think there needs to be some greater understanding that the government can't just push all its problems to the private sector and say, you fix it, you come up with the solutions. Particularly when it comes to, if I could give one message to the government would be, you need to understand viability on sites. In that they keep trying to impose certain regulations, particularly most famously the affordable housing requirements of sites, that look all very politically palatable and of course want to deliver affordable homes. But it's a cliche at this point. 0% of nothing is still nothing. Sorry, 50% of nothing is still nothing. So there needs to be greater understanding that they need to work with developers more constructively to actually get something built.
Okay, I was going to open up to the floor for a few minutes. Any questions from the floor? Gosh, everyone's absolutely all questions answered. Okay, so the final one for me then is around sort of overall, and I'm hoping we can end on a positive note, and I'm not trying to feed you words, but is there reason to be optimistic about the future here, or is it all doom and gloom? Please.
Well, I think there's always reason to be positive when a government sat there saying they want to build 1.5 million homes over the course of the Parliament. I think that creates the impetus to go. Obviously, Angela Rayner's there. She stepped in just recently on the garden development in Kent, and obviously she wants to really push things forward. So that surely has to be a positive, I think, for everybody. But obviously, how we get there is another thing. And I saw the ministry for let's go MHL, CGT, whatever it is this week. But they're saying that it's unlikely that we're going to have that many houses built in the next couple of years, which means for the last 3 years of the government, we're going to have to start building 300,000 to 400,000 homes a year to meet that target. Which I
think on the first several generations.
We think we're halfway through the first year virtually, so it's going to be a tall order to hit that target. But if we get close to it, we're fantastic. But I think there are also problems as well about the amount of social housing too, and the fact that if you're going to buy a master defensive building development and 50% of it is for social housing, then I think that has their knock-on effect in value as well. But that's a conversation for another day.
Reasons for optimism?
I'm really optimistic. I mean, again, coming back to this point I made earlier, we now actually have a government that does seem to really understand a lot of the issues, has a decent plan. I think it's misunderstanding some things, so it's more really optimistic as some of those house building targets. But what's the phrase? It's better aim for the moon than the initiative still won't end among the stars. So.
I was literally just about to use that phrase. Great minds. That's something equally poetic now. I think you're right. From our point of view, we see the market growing. I think it's the pace of growth in it, and it's how you really put turbochargers on that. But I think absolutely the point about finally having a government that is really passionate about building and getting things done and having that vision, because for too long that we've had frankly we have had a government that has talked the industry down and hasn't seemed to recognise that, and indeed ignored the industry as well. So I think yes, the circumstances are challenging, I would say, but it doesn't mean that there's not cause for optimism. It can be turned around. And I think with the right levers it can be done. I think we just need to see a few more of them.
So I guess where that leaves us is sort of watching this space, hoping that, as you say, you get the planks in place to make this happen, and waiting for us government departments to talk to each other and drive the detail.
And I think it's important to understand as well that we've had a year and a half of proper events, elections. We've had a proper change around on everything, Trump in, and I think we've thrown a massive stone in a very still lake. Those ripples are just subsiding. And I think next year, when I look at road bumps, there aren't that many next year. We'll be back for you next year. I just think hopefully we'll have another interest rate cut on the 19th of December. We'll have a little race to avoid stamp duty at the end of March, and hopefully it will set the year up as a means to go on, really.
Well, good point to end. Thank you, everybody. Hope you found it enlightening, interesting. I certainly have. Big round of applause, George, Ed, Ben. Thank you very much.